The southwest of Ireland is home to some of the most special scenery in the world. I'm going to walk through the top 10 adventures from our trip in the summer of 2023. Now, this is my subjective list, but stay tuned through the end when I'll talk about some of the destinations that either we didn't make it to this time or we didn't quite enjoy as much as our top 10. Either way, you'll want to consider these honorable mentions for your upcoming trip. In total, I've spent about 5 months of my life exploring in or living in this beautiful country. Today, I'll be strictly talking about the west coast of Ireland, which in my opinion is the best coast, and you should focus on visiting there if you only have a 1 or 2 week trip planned. So, without further ado, here are our top 10. Many of you may not be familiar with what the Ring of Kerry is, so let me break it down a bit. The Ring of Kerry isn't so much a destination as it is an area of Ireland. It's a 111-mile or 180-kilometer driving loop that includes some of the most beautiful scenery in Ireland. The driving loop is just a jumping-off point to do other activities in Ireland. In fact, you'll see activities that are on the Ring of Kerry later in this list. A side note, this is the first time myself driving in Ireland, and if you're comfortable driving long distances like I am, I couldn't recommend it more. The reason the Ring of Kerry isn't higher on the list is because in this case, I'm referring to simply the drive. That's right, so not even including the activities you can do along the way, just driving this loop makes my top 10. That's how spectacular it is. Inisheer is the smallest of the Aran Islands and the closest to the mainland. Prior to this trip, I'd explored the largest island, Inishmore, several times, and this small island was a worthwhile alternative. While it doesn't have the sweeping cliffs and wormhole that its larger neighbor has, it makes up for some of that with its charm and quaintness. We took a horse and buggy tour of the small island to its main attraction, Plassey Shipwreck from the 1960s. Much of the fun was actually outside of the tour, simply overhearing our tour guide chatting with the other tour guides in their native Gaelic. We spent the rest of the time picking up handmade Aran Island sweaters, grabbing fish and chips at a local food truck, and enjoying lunch on the beach with a special friend. Coming in at number 8 is one of those activities you can do along the Ring of Kerry, the Gap of Dunlow. The Gap refers to an area where 2 mountains meet in Killarney National Park. The Gap has a narrow road that most visitors walk on, but there is also the option to rent a bike or take a horse and buggy tour. Driving the road during peak hours is heavily discouraged due to the aforementioned foot traffic and bikes and horse and buggies, but if you come very early in the morning, you can beat the rush and drive yourself. We opted to walk the road, but because the full out and back is around 11 miles, we only made it about halfway. When we return someday, we'll get out there early and drive it so we can explore the entire stretch. Within the Gap, you're surrounded by mountains on either side, with lakes and rivers flowing around you, and sheep and horses grazing the hillsides. When you reach the right spot, you'll see horse and buggy tour guides yelling into the Gap to demonstrate the echo effect. Charles Fort is a hidden gem full of rich history within the small port town of Kinsale. We stumbled upon the site after putting Bowman Bar into the GPS and searching around for parking. We saw some commotion around the fort and decided to enter, and for €3 a piece, we discovered one of the highlights of our trip. Exploring the ruins of what used to be a massive fortification on the Irish Sea opened our minds to some of Ireland's tumultuous history. After examining the fort for several hours, we walked down the steep hill to Bowman Bar for a pint of Guinness and great atmosphere. The lovely understated town of Kinsale was just 10 minutes south of where we stayed during the first part of our trip in Riverstick. We explored the shops and restaurants several times throughout our stay and found it much more enjoyable than going to the bigger cities of Cork and even Galway. Similar to the Ring of Kerry, Connemara is an area of Ireland, and its placement at number 6 refers to simply driving around its spectacular landscape. The mountain range is a little over an hour north of Galway, and it offers everything you could ask for in scenic Ireland. Farmland, mountains, lakes, rivers, and ocean. We spent 2 days exploring this area, one where we fully drove around the loop. You really can't take a wrong turn in Connemara. Once you enter it, everywhere you look is absolute beauty. For food and drink, Clifton is considered the capital of the area and has some great pubs that are worth checking out after a long day of exploring. Next up, I'll talk about some of the things that we did while we were in the area, but just remember that driving around this loop is a treat in itself. One of the coolest things we did while we were in Connemara was stop at a farm and watch a demonstration of how the sheepdogs herd sheep in the high hills of the mountains. We expected this to be cute, but it turned out to be one of the highlights of our trip. The farm we visited couldn't have been more scenic, perched just above a lake in between two mountain ranges. The owner of the farm knows how to appeal to the tourists, as he let us play with the puppies before things got started. Then he brought out his star cattle dog and, as if it was an extension of himself, had it bring sheep down the mountain and around the grass. One dog was able to direct a large herd of sheep, and the dog was happy to obey each of its owner's commands and did so with stunning accuracy. After the demonstration, the owner showed us the rest of his farm, including a baby goat, a lamb, and he told us more stories about the current state of sheep farming in Ireland as we basked in the beauty all around us. The Skellig Islands are a set of islands off the coast of Portmagee, a small coastal village towards the western edge of the Ring of Kerry. Taking a tour to this small island was one of the focal points of our trip. It's the activity we spent the most money on and look forward to the most. As part of the tour, you'll climb 700 steps to the top of the steep island, where a group of monks lived as far back as the 6th century. Our boat was scheduled to leave at 8 a.m., and we had nearly a 3-hour drive. Knowing that Ireland roads typically take longer than expected, we woke up at 3:30 a.m. and set off at 4. It was a windy morning, which made the seas extra choppy, and we held on for dear life as our speedboat soared up and down with each wave. The morning rain and splashing waves became indistinguishable. Either way, we were soaked. I neglected to bring Dramamine, which meant my head was spinning by the time we made it to the rocky island. A bit of fair warning. If you're not up for a thrilling adventure, you might want to take a non-landing tour, which is less than half the price of a landing tour. If you are up for the climb, beware. The steep stairs to the top were hand-built by monks over 1,000 years ago, so they're uneven, slippery, and often feature vertical drops to either side. If you're not a confident hiker or you're afraid of heights, this can be dangerous, especially on wet or soft mornings. That being said, if you are up for the adventure, you'll enjoy stellar views all the way up to a section where the wind picks up and you'll see a hidden peak of the island. Up at the top of the climb, you'll witness the beehive huts where the 12 monks who resided on the island survived off the land, and you'll get a description of the history of the island from one of the workers. This extraordinary experience might be even higher on my list, but the treacherous seas made it more difficult for me to fully enjoy. If you're impervious to such challenges, then you will absolutely love it. These cliffs are probably the most underrated destination in Ireland. Conveniently just a 5-minute drive from Portmagee, where we had left for our Skellig Island tour, exploring this incredible site was, again, one of the highlights of our trip. Not overly crowded, and at just €5 for entry, these are easily accessible via a short 10 to 20 minute walk. We took our time exploring from the right side of the cliff trail all the way over to the left. Each surreal view outdid the last, as we peered down the 1,000-foot drop to the ocean crashing against the rocks below, and looked towards the channel across to the Skellig Islands. Although the Cliffs of Moher are undoubtedly more iconic, because the Kerry Cliffs are quieter and equally, if not even more spectacular, we strongly preferred them. I hadn't heard of Diamond Hill before this trip to Ireland, and there's a good chance you haven't heard of it until now. This relatively short but still very challenging hike in Connemara was worth every bead of sweat we burned on the way to the top. I imagine many soft Irish days conceal the views from the summit, but the day we climbed it, the sky remained clear and the temperatures were perfectly cool. On the way up, we even received the blessing of a light mist to cool us off as the Irish sun beat down upon us. The hike is fully exposed with very little tree coverage, which means there are open views almost immediately. The path is impeccably maintained and wide open, making it impossible to lose your way. The summit might just be the best panoramic view I've ever seen, and this is coming from someone who hikes thousands of feet of elevation most weekends. As you reach the peak, there's an open ridge trail for the last quarter mile, with the ocean and green mountains behind you, an open valley to your right, rockier mountains, lakes, and an historic abbey to your left, and finally a sprawling range of mountains straight ahead of you. Each direction looks like a different planet from the last, each trying to outdo the last with its beauty. The hike clocks in at just over 4 miles, but don't let that fool you. It isn't a walk in the park. If you're up for the climb, you're in for one of the best payoffs I've ever seen. Now, this was a hard choice, but when I think of how much this single place had to offer, I have to go with the Dingle Peninsula. Right away, we were amazed at the scenery as we approached it. The ocean and beaches opened up to our left, with farmland and mountains to our right. Then we reached the town of Dingle, where we had one of the best meals of our trip. We drove further through the peninsula, as the route became even more captivating, with a steep, rocky cliff on one side of us and the ocean to our left. Soon after, we reached a beach nestled with a cave-like cliff. Our final stop was impossibly beautiful green and brown cliffs over the ocean, which is quintessential Ireland. The drive back was as incredible as the drive in, and we left Dingle wanting more. As promised, let's go through some of the places that I'd highly recommend you see if you've got a trip to the southwest of Ireland coming up. While these destinations didn't make our top 10 for this particular trip, I've either enjoyed them on previous trips or I simply think they're worth mentioning. We spent the majority of our time out on farmland and in the country. That being said, we did have some time in the heart of Galway, enjoying pints and live music. If you want to get out of the crowds of Quay Street and enjoy some traditional Irish music, check out Crane Bar for music every night at 9:30. If you're looking for a great brunch the morning after, don't miss Della. During this trip, we opted to try something different and see one of the smaller Aran Islands. That being said, if we had gone to Inishmore, it would have been high up on this list. This island is amazing, with so many sights to see, and if you're on a day trip, never enough time to fully relish them all. Epic cliffs, natural wonder called the Wormhole, and ancient ruins to name a few. If you're in the Galway area, do not miss this one. Many of you may be wondering why this wasn't on my list already, and maybe it's just because I'm jaded as this is the 4th time I've gone to these cliffs and they seem to get more crowded every time. We saw them as part of our bus tour after Inisheer, and we had less than an hour to explore them, which made our experience less than ideal. I will say though, every time I've gone in the past, it's been an incredible experience, and for the photos and novelty alone, don't miss this iconic wonder if you've never seen it before. The region known as the Burren is a beautiful limestone landscape, with much of it near the coast. We only saw it this time through the lens of our bus tour, but it may be worth exploring further with a car. A side benefit is you can easily pair this trip with your visit to the Cliffs of Moher. Because it was so crowded the one day we attempted to visit, we didn't do much more than drive through Cork. That being said, from past experience, I can tell you it's an awesome city to go visit, check out pubs, enjoy the nightlife, and explore its history. My last honorable mention is the small coastal village of Crosshaven. We found this spot by opening a book in our Airbnb, and we absolutely loved it. We began at a high lookout above the bay, and then we drove into the village for a lovely breakfast at River's End Cafe, and finally took a walk on the river. The fact that we picked a random town off the map of Ireland and enjoyed it as much as we did speaks to what you can find in this beautiful country just by exploring it. If I had one overarching recommendation from this trip, it is to rent a car so you can simply explore the wonder of Ireland. Have an idea of where you're going, but don't get too stuck to it, and be willing to take a chance. Try somewhere new. After all, that's what traveling's all about. So let me know what you think in the comments section below. Did I miss anything? Do you have a trip coming up and you want to hear more? And wherever you decide to go, enjoy the journey.